Welcome to a Christian Business Podcast. I am now one of your hosts, joined by, from episode 1, Justin Curtis with Overbuilt Construction and Northwoods Greenscapes. Thanks for joining me, Justin. I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah.
And we are also, a lot of people will ask when I talk to them about the podcast, they'll say, what's kind of your goal of the podcast? What's your purpose? Who are you looking to have listen? And Grant is kind of one of those people. Grant Swinger with Compass Driving School here in West Michigan was teaching full-time high school and then and has been walking with Jesus for a long time. And then he started the driving school while he was teaching. And so he was a person who was a believer who was new into the business world and trying to navigate all of those things. And we're going to really get into that transition period. And so Grant Swinger runs Compass Driving School now. That's his full-time gig. And you run through about how many students a year?
Ooh,
I'm sorry, I didn't prep you for that question.
yeah, I'd say I think we were about 400 to 500 last year.
Wow. Okay, so 400 to 500 students, and you started teaching with Compass Driving School how long ago?
Excuse me, about 7.5, 8 years ago.
Okay, so in 8 years you came to 400 to 500 students. That's awesome. So really want to dig into that some. And we did talk about devotion. Did you prepare a little something for us?
You were bringing the devotion. No,
I told you had to let me know by last night. So
yes, that's true.
You are on the hook.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. So I'll just read 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." My wife and I were kind of talking the last couple of days about, what to share and just reflecting on these, last years and everything that's happened. And that was a verse that came to mind that I think really we look back and we can see that there is a lot of, and in life in general, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things that either we feel is a weakness for us or, something that we're deficient in, something that we don't feel like we can rise up to the challenge. And so it's wonderful to know that God's strength works through times when we feel weak, when we don't feel like we have, the ability, the strength, the energy, whatever to do things, that he works through that and can shine through that. And it's really neat to see him come through, and then we can step back and just say, wow, God did that. We don't have any illusion of our own pride or our own ability. We can just rest in that. So that's something we've seen a lot in the years.
Right, because that was I'm so excited to get part of that story. I have to back myself off. Justin, hold me back. That's your job today as my
You want me to just
hold me back.
Okay.
Pull the chair back. So
I'm out the door.
And really, it's when you say power made perfect in weakness, and you talk about there's no question when you get to that point. I think we look across the whole Bible and we can see where God didn't just make it happen. He put people so far into the negative that there was no way to be like, well, that was just coincidence or whatever, because if he had just barely done it, but he pulls us so far into the negative and then moves so far into the positive, Mr. Math Teacher, that there is no doubt in our mind that's him. So, make no mistake, this was me.
Well, you think back to the story of Gideon when he,
yes,
and they're getting ready. They're overwhelmed already with the enemy, and they're like, all right, we're going to do the best we can. We'll muster all the troops, and God's like, no, too many.
Right.
God, you understand? There's a lot of them, and so, but it's no, too many. But you're right. He leaves it to a spot where they couldn't have said anything but, God did this.
Right.
So
right. That whole Gideon concept. So no, I appreciate that. And I'm sure you saw a lot of that Justin, you're not holding me back. I'm sure you saw a lot of that in your transition period. So before we get to the transition period, Grant, talk to us about you, just your personal story, born at a very young age and, then what?
Every time, really.
I was born.
Did I do that already?
I was born at a pretty young age, It was very convenient. I was born very near my mother, so I could be closer. It was very helpful that way.
Oh, he doubled down.
He took it to another level. That was awesome. That was good.
Just following your lead.
Nothing like a bunch of dads around the microphone.
I can go on. So, But to get to the question you probably wanted me to answer. So yeah, I was born into a family, great Christian family. No one has a perfect upbringing, but my parents did a great job. They taught us, they trained us, and I knew who God was from a very young age. And I would say that probably wasn't until I was in high school my faith became my own, that I kind of had that moment where it felt like God was saying, you need to either really do this, and this needs to be you, who you are, or you probably should just stop living like it is. And so that was an important point.
Was there a certain experience or something like that led to that?
Well, it was, I think, the environment. It was at a church camp, summer camp.
Awesome. Okay.
So yeah, and just this sort of thing, you get speakers that they really just force you to really examine things, to think about things. And I was 17 years old at the time. Cool. So just kind of the time when you're really having to think through a lot of those things. Who are you going to be as an adult when your parents aren't around and you get to make your own decisions? What does this mean to you? Is this something that you really believe?
Right. So before that, you were kind of like the kid who looks good on the outside. He's at church every Sunday and answering questions in Sunday school and all that, saying prayers at bedtime, but it was never really real. Is that?
Well, it's tough to evaluate that time in my life, because my head knowledge was great. I knew a lot about the Bible. Went to lots of the Sunday school classes, the youth groups, the different sorts of groups. I knew a lot, and I wouldn't say that I would say I believed, I understood, but it just wasn't. I didn't have that personal relationship. That I wasn't really pursuing God, and so I don't know. I'd have to really think back about what that time was like.
Head knowledge versus heart knowledge kind of concept. You had it all in your head. Oh yes, I believe in God and I know all this stuff about him, but I really don't know him. Mm-hmm. Got you. Incubation period, as Randy said. So then 17, 18, when did you meet your wife?
We met in college, Spanish class.
College Spanish class. Yep. So hablas español muy bien, ¿verdad?
No, so it was, what was funny about it is neither of us in the end really should have taken that class. She was going to be a Spanish minor at the time. She ended up opting to change to a reading minor. She's an elementary education major. And so she felt like that fit her a little bit more and was just better for what she would want to do. And so, but she was on that track to do a Spanish minor. So she was doing the Spanish class. I was supposed to be in a Spanish class just to meet some of the basic requirements of going to college. I was supposed to be in that class a year before, and my advisor wasn't doing a great job advising me. After my schedule came out for that year, he's like, why didn't you take Spanish then? I'm like, you didn't tell me to. I should have probably been a better advocate for myself and knowing what I was supposed to do. But either way.
But now you have to thank your advisor.
I do, because we were in that class together. And
she's awesome.
And, well, of course. And anyway. If she's listening she probably will be listening. But she is, either way.
Do you want to take a minute and earn some points? Or the mic is yours, man.
Thank you. Well, we can stick to it. So, yes, we met in Spanish class, and it was, we had a few mutual friends and just kind of got to know each other as friends for about a year or so. And then after that, started dating, and we were dating for just over a year, got engaged for about a year, and then we got married right about when we were graduating.
Wow. Well, you're in college. Okay, so I can see waiting when you're in college. Like, I can see a little bit of that.
Yeah, we were pretty young. We were, well, let's see, how old were we? I think we were 22 and 23 when we got married.
I think I was too. But we did it in 5.5 months.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
Oh my gosh.
That's quick.
So, moving on. So you got a job pretty quickly. You were teaching at a...
Yeah, as far as, professionally, I graduated with a degree in secondary education. So basically I could teach high school or middle school math or social studies. And she got her degree in elementary education, so she could teach, younger kids. And so at the time, it was 2007 when we graduated, and the market for teaching jobs in Michigan, where we're at, and the entire Midwest for that matter, was really tough. Mm-hmm. If you didn't have teaching experience, you had very little chance to get in and get a job. So like many people that graduated at the time we did with teaching degrees, we moved down south. And so we went and lived in Georgia for less than a year, but we found jobs at the same district in Macon, Georgia. And so we were down there for, like I said, less than a year. And then we really wanted to get back closer to family, so we were looking all over the Midwest primarily. And I found a job near Bourbonnais, Illinois, which is just a little way south of Chicago. And
I'm going to stop you a second. Where are you originally from? From West Michigan?
yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yep, Grand Rapids area.
Got you. Sorry, continue.
And so anyway, we moved there. At that point, we found out that we were expecting our oldest son, Micah. And so that time we decided that Melissa was going to stay home full time. And so I had the job teaching at a school there in Illinois. And so I taught there. I taught there for 2 years. And we decided that being in Illinois wasn't close enough. And so
let me ask you this.
yeah.
So she had Micah, and you were in Illinois teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a lot of folks out there that are screaming about low pay for teachers.
Mm-hmm.
You had single income and a child. Did you own a home at that time?
No, we were renting an
You
apartment.
were renting an apartment. Was that financially strapping for you?
No. We live differently, I think, than the average person.
Got it.
A lot of things that I think people typically think of as necessities, we don't do. For instance, we've never had TV service of any kind that we've paid for.
Right.
And amazingly, we're still alive.
But wait a minute.
That's weird.
You probably don't know who Lady Gaga is.
Unfortunately, I've heard of her. Yeah. We've always been. I used to teach classes in personal finance as well, and it's something that I've always been interested in. I've always been, and both Melissa and I, my wife and I, are both naturally savers. So I think it comes for us fairly easily. Some people probably have to work at that more, but it was a lot more natural for us to be just more careful, more cautious. And I would also say getting into a good financial position is not something that it's a very long-term process. It's a series of good decisions and doing things very carefully, cautiously, and saying no to some things over the course of years and eventually a lifetime. So there are a lot of people in difficult positions financially, but it's something that I think it's a long-term process.
It's a result of, Justin, the
Discipline?
choices you make.
Okay, I have no idea where you're going with that, but yes.
I didn't know either. I was hoping you did.
It's Justin's. That's Justin is. Everybody makes choices. That's
Everybody
Justin
makes
is
choices.
constantly talking to me about that.
So I always tell my kids, play dumb games, win dumb prizes type thing. So, you want to go sliding down the steps in your sleeping bag and hit the wall on the other side of it and smack your head, or put a hole through my drywall. Well, we get dumb consequences for that. So same thing in life.
But when you talk about employees and stuff, the same thing. You are where you are as a result of
Yes,
the choices
that
you've
you make
made.
and the sacrifices that you make. I mean, I can kind of I think there's a lot of similarities. Like when we get started, so when I was 17, that's when I met God, and so I think that's really cool. But our thing, even with my wife and I, was, well, we're gonna have to start having kids. I don't want someone else. The hard thing, as Serena was still going to college when we got married, and then had our first kid, and then had our second kid, and then we had our third just as she was finishing up. That, I mean, I want to say it was like a dumb choice, but it didn't make it easy. But I think if you realize looking back, I don't ever want to do it again because that was hard. But at the same time, it sets you up later in life to do better things, or I guess to be further along.
To have
someone
better
else.
opportunities.
Yes. Thank you.
What I would tell my students when we did personal finance classes, because some students would say, well, I don't want to be all about the money. It's not all about money. And okay, that's good. It's good to not be all about the money. The Bible says that love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So yes, I don't want to love money either, but if you're wise with how you manage your lifestyle, manage your finances, your all those things, you can put yourself in a spot where you have financial freedom or financial independence, and that's going to give you a lot more freedom, independence in your life. So for instance, you and your wife, and my wife and I had the same desire that when we had kids, she really wanted to stay home and be a full-time mom because of all the work we had done, the sacrifices we'd made, and the goal that we had to do that. We got to the point where we were expecting our oldest son, and we were able to do that. So the more you can, I guess, manage your finances well, the better you can follow God's calling and God's desires that he puts into your heart.
Oh,
for your
absolutely.
life.
And I think it opens up more opportunities. So, I mean,
Yes.
even 4 years ago, I wouldn't have the time to do something like this on a Friday. And this is kind of where is like you go through and you evolve, like even, like you from going to a teacher and then moving into owning a driving school, like, as we get into that story, it's that same thing. You're set up and you're doing one thing where all you're doing is following wherever God is plugging you along in. And that's been, and I think that's cool because you're just willing to walk through it. And then whatever opportunity that may look like, you're just, okay, let's go. And that's cool.
Well, and
it's really cool.
I think that, obviously God can, like we talked about with Gideon, right? God can break us down to nothing and then show up in huge ways. But I don't see a lot where God uses people who continue to make poor choices that with the concept that God's going to take care of it, so I can go spend $120 a month on the NFL Sunday ticket because when God calls me to do something, he'll just show up with the money. It's like a backwards way of thinking.
Do you want to get into predestination versus free will here? Is that where we're going? I didn't think this is a theology podcast, but we can do that.
No, I understand what you're saying. It was
Maybe
funny.
you can articulate it a little better than I just did.
So Serena had a conversation with a group of people earlier this week or last week, and they were talking about, just having faith to do things. And she's like, yes, but God doesn't, we don't just walk into the middle of an intersection knowing the dangers that be there and go, oh, God's got it. Like,
Right.
you can't do that. Like, you have to use the resources that you've been given. You put a brain between your ears to be able to use to, make decisions.
Right,
Well,
right.
Just like when Jesus was tempted, Satan said, "Throw yourself down from the temple."
Yeah.
And he quoted scripture, and he was right. But
Yeah.
Jesus said, "No, don't put God to the test."
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, going on.
Put on your seatbelt.
Yes,
Use your turn signal.
that's right. If you want to go
See
down
what I
that
did
road,
there? Is he gonna go down that road? Dude, we're awful. We're awful. Go down that road.
I don't think so.
I think he's trying to make a plug for your business, which you can, by the way. But
okay.
we'll get to that when we get to that.
All right, let's continue. Let's keep moving on.
Done, Justin.
Yeah. So you met your wife, had one kid now. Mm-hmm. Where are we going?
Yeah,
from
it's
here?
okay. So we're
Illinois,
We're
right?
living in Illinois. We have our first child, and we decided, okay, we're not really close enough to family. We're about 4 hours drive away from family, but we have a newborn baby. My wife is, kind of feeling a little isolated, doesn't have lots and lots of people around that she knows. And so she's feeling like, it'd be great to be closer to family. And I agree. It'd be great to be close to family. So start looking for teaching jobs back in, West Michigan, where we're from. And so had an opportunity to take a job in Fremont at a small Christian school. And so we went ahead and made that move. That put us within an hour of both of our parents. And we felt like, okay, great. This is much closer. So we moved to Fremont and start teaching at the school. Very small Christian school. We had just grades 9 through 12, so just a high school. And I think at the peak enrollment, we had about 74 kids in the school, the years that I was there. And so after 3 full years at the school there, the school was kind of declining in enrollment, and the board made the decision to close the school kind of abruptly in, what year was that? I think it was 2013. So that was a hard time. That was a difficult time. Transitioned from there. We decided at that point, we thought, well, do we want to move somewhere else? Do we want to, go to a different community? We love the community. So we thought, well, it'd be great to stay here. And so I found a job at a virtual school. Never taught virtually. It's a high school math and social studies
Before
teacher.
COVID.
Before COVID. Virtual school before it was hip.
Or
Excuse me, before it was mandatory. Back when it was hip.
It was. So And I that's when all of that happened, I felt like, oh, this is no big deal. I'm used to this.
So what?
I did it for 5 years. So from 2013 to 2018, I worked for a virtual high school and worked from home, did my classes in my basement on my laptop, and had students all around the state. And it was a neat experience in some ways. And just getting to use a different sort of medium. I've been teaching at that point had been teaching in a traditional classroom for 5-6 years or so. Mm-hmm. And so I had begun to feel pretty comfortable with that. And then teaching virtually, okay, this is a little bit different, but you don't have behavior issues in a virtual school. The bad kids usually don't show up. Yep. And if they do, and if they're causing any problems, you literally have a mute button.
That's kind of awesome.
That was there are teachers listening going, oh, I want a mute button.
So, and usually we had the opposite problem when if there were any issues, we couldn't get the kids to participate, to talk. Yeah. That was a big thing to push for, try to get more engagement. And
because most of the students that were doing virtual school were doing it a lot for social reasons, though, right? Like
variety of reasons.
Variety
of reasons. Okay. Yeah, you get the kids who they were just uncomfortable with having lots of kids around. Some kids that felt like they were being really bullied and didn't feel safe and comfortable in school. Some kids who just thought, I don't want to, I just want to focus on my academics. I don't want to deal with everything else. Some people who just had abnormal sorts of schedules. And we had a few people who were involved in like high levels of athletics. So they were on like a
travel teams,
and stuff like a travel hockey team where they're like on track to be a professional hockey player in the next however many years. So they've got to be doing this and this, so allowed them to travel. So you had different things, different reasons. Gotcha. Some people running from behavior, discipline issues at their school.
So really, the students, like the demographics, the makeup of students was not much different than in a regular school, like a traditional school setting. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't hugely different. You just had a couple of extras in there.
Yeah, no, it was you never quite knew. You never knew who was going to be in your class. I mean, you get to know the students over time, but they're all over the state. I'd have kids that were in downtown Detroit. I'd have kids who were in rural Upper Peninsula. All over the place, a variety of different places. So it was interesting. You got quite the mix. And then the last year I was there, they asked me to speak at the graduation ceremony, and it was kind of interesting because that's pretty much the only time that everyone would get together, or at least everyone who was graduating would get together. And it was in Lansing, and they, big auditorium. And it's interesting.
You love public speaking and being in the limelight and being the center of attention. Like you and I are the same in that. Like we're pretty much twins in that.
Yes, we're brothers with that. No, I do not.
That is sarcasm.
I do not like public speaking, despite being a teacher, which is kind of like public speaking. But no, it was a stretch. They asked me at that point because we had, I think it was when I started with the virtual school, it was the first year that school was in operation, and it grew like wildfire. I was the second high school teacher hired. Mm-hmm. By the time that I left the school, I think we had 50, 60 teachers in the high school. And,
really?
Dang.
Tons of teachers overall. So yeah, it just grew astronomically, it seemed like. So I was one of the first people there, and the group that we had graduating was one of the first groups that had gone through their entire high school time with us. And so they asked me to speak for that reason. And I thought, okay, all right, I guess I can do this.
That's cool.
Okay, I got this. All right, Justin.
Yes.
Can I go now? Can we get into transition? Can we do it?
Do it.
You don't have any other questions?
No.
Yes. Okay, so then you, for some reason, decided to look into something else.
Yeah. You want me to go from there?
Can you share the beginnings of that? I'm so excited.
So I love working with students, with teenagers. I know that sounds strange probably to some people. Teenagers are, you get some interesting things. You never know what they're going to say, but it's really neat. I guess I have a heart for working with them because they're at a time in their life, they're really growing, developing, learning, who they are, what they believe. A lot like I was when I was, that age.
Right. That was a pivotal moment for you at 17. And so working with people in that situation probably is a pretty heavy Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can see all this, as they're thinking, processing, they're looking at the world. They're old enough, they can understand the world a lot more than, say, an elementary school kid, a middle school kid. They start to understand a lot more like an adult. They're thinking a little bit more like an adult, although you have those lapses where they're not thinking like an adult. But they're generally speaking, when you get, I wouldn't say one-on-one because I'm usually in the car with two students. So, but you get 1-on-2 and, smaller group. And by and large, they're thinking very deeply. They're thinking more like an adult would. And it's kind of been my heart to work with students at that age. And I've done that as a classroom teacher. And then now, of course, doing what I'm doing in the driver's education. But so how did I get to where we're at now? I was teaching high school, and I would say looking back now, God makes things clear as we look back. Mm-hmm. So looking back now, both my wife and I can say, okay, this is, God was kind of starting to prepare us, push us towards this direction, because I remember about a year or so before we started the process to begin the business, I kind of had this urge, like, I want to try something different. I've gotten to the point with the virtual school. I feel pretty comfortable, doing what I'm doing. I feel like I can do it well enough. Excuse me. But I just had this kind of like, I'd like to do something else. I'd like to, either try to start a business or try to go in a different direction, work in some sort of, lots of different ideas. Should I try this? Should I try that? Different interests, different things. I just thought I want to go a different direction.
You got the itch.
Yeah, and it's some things, not to go on a bunny trail about this, but some things in kind of traditional high school public education are not in a great spot. And so I didn't love the idea of spending, another 20 years or so in that sort of an environment. Now, not to say that teachers who are in that environment, there's so much good work for them to do. The kids really need good teachers in their schools too. So I have a heart for that too. But I felt like I wanted to try something different. And so for a long time, it was, should I try this? I looked into this and talking with my wife, and just, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little discontent, and I need to get over that.
As much as I hate to do this, Grant, I want to back up for just a second. Your wife homeschools,
mm-hmm.
and you were teaching at a public school.
Correct.
Did that ever cause any, like, for you internally, like, am I supporting something that I don't support? Were you able to, like, no, this is needed, and I am capable and qualified, and just because, so you weren't really, talk to me about that. Was there ever any difficulty there?
Trying to think of an easy way to say this. I was a missionary.
Okay.
So the kids that I was teaching, they need someone. They're going to go to school. They're going to have, if they aren't homeschooled, they're going to go to a school. They're going to have a teacher teaching them. And so I wanted to be that person teaching them that, obviously we're primarily learning math, social studies, all the different things that I'm teaching. But the teacher that guides a student, the teacher that works with a student, has such an impact. There's so much they can do that that was the role I felt like God had brought me to and given me the desire to fulfill. So I was teaching, students in the school. My wife was teaching our kids at home. Yeah, it just it wasn't a conflict.
There wasn't anything. Okay, no, that's fine. So you got this itch. You were seeing the writing on the wall as far as where public school might be going, and did you really want to connect with that, or is there something else God is leading you to? Mulling over ideas. Mm-hmm. What settled you?
What settled me? What's funny is that when we were first talking about this, the idea of doing driver's education never even came up. And if it would have crossed either of our minds, we would have probably laughed. So God has a funny way of doing that, where he brings you to places and then, gives you the desire and gets you into things. You're like, how did I get, wow. Because when I was younger, I thought I never want to be a teacher, and here got into teaching. And then, anyway, so what started it was about a year after we started kind of thinking about, like, okay, should we do something different? Or some period of time before that. My dad had been doing driver's ed for years and years before. It was something, he was a teacher. He did it in the summertime and been doing it for a long, long time. And so I knew just a little bit about it from that. And he had gotten to the point where he was starting to train driver's ed instructors, which is a very small niche thing. There are not too many people out there who train drivers.
Volunteer for something like that? Yeah, I don't know. I remember riding with students. I was like, oh boy.
So he the company that he was working for, that he was training for, was really trying to get instructors, and he just called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm starting a class this weekend, and the price, the cost to get in and do this training is a whole lot cheaper than it usually is. If you ever were interested in getting into driver's ed, this would be a good time to do it." And I don't know why he told me that, because I don't think I'd ever expressed an interest into it. But he told me, and usually I'd be like, "Oh, okay," and just kind of let it go. But I had a couple days to think about it, and after a day or two, I'm like, I think that's not actually too bad of an idea. So I thought that, and then I went ahead and broached the subject with my wife. And my wife she's really good at helping me see when I have a bad idea. So if
I think all wives are pretty good at that.
Well, especially her. She's incredibly gifted with discernment. So
if we're ever like trying to write something where I throw out like 10 different, like we could say this, and she'll just listen and be like, "Okay, that one there, that one's okay. Let's work with that idea." She's just very good at that. So I throw out this idea and just like, "So what do you think about the idea of doing starting driver's education here, starting our own school doing that?" And I fully expecting her to be like, "Oh, I don't think that's a good idea," and just kind of letting it move on. But she didn't. She was like, "Huh, well, that's an interesting idea." And as we started, we had a couple days to kind of talk and think about it. And the more we looked at it, we realized it was kind of like the intersection of several different things that either I was interested in, I liked to do, or I had the gift to do, or was a need, something that we saw as a need. And so the more we looked at it and thought about it, I thought, wow, this actually probably isn't a bad idea. And so within less than a week from when my dad planted the idea in my head, I was in his training class, and
they're gonna start a business.
That's right.
That's
get
awesome.
there the first day and jumping on in, and that first day it was a long day of training. The first day, and I thought to myself, "What am I doing?"
That's so awesome.
what am I doing?
But as with anything, you have to persevere through some things that are difficult. Nothing ever comes easy. Nothing worth doing, and that's really worthwhile, is ever going to come easy.
At this time, you were, because during the summers and stuff, you did a lot of power washing, and there were a few other things that you did to kind of keep moving through the summer. Did you ever go, "Hey, this is a whole lot to do, and we have a couple of kids"?
In terms of
Just like time and investment of time and being a dad and balancing now three
Oh, you're
things.
talking about work-life balance. I'm sorry, I'm not fluent in that. Oh, that's a good question. And that's something, Melissa and I we talk about that a lot. And our big picture perspective is that we want to make the sacrifices so that she can be home full time. She doesn't have anything where she has to worry about, okay, I've got to get a few hours in doing this or doing that to try to help support the family financially. We feel like if I can do everything I can to take care of that side of it, she can be fully devoted to the kids and the home. That's where her heart is. That's what she's always wanted to do, and that's honestly what I like her to do too.
And it shows, because your kids are incredible. They're just, we love
Thank you.
them.
I'm pretty fond of them too.
That my kids just love being around them, and we just love seeing them. We see them at church and whatnot, and they're really, really great kids. And I think that's a testimony of how you and Melissa have decided to make that happen in terms of parenting. So,
Well, thank you. That's very flattering. I'll try not to let it go to my head.
no, well, it was more for Melissa than for you. So your
That's
head
true.
can stay small.
That's true. Fair enough.
Great. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Go power wash and teach. You just
But yeah, I did power wash. That's part of what led to the driver's ed experience, because when I was in college, and I was not academically, I wouldn't say I wasn't academically gifted. I wasn't a very good student in high school. And so when it came to going to college, I wasn't going to get scholarships. And so I worked in college a lot. I tell my students in class sometimes when I talk about that time, I worked lots of hours. I had no social life, and it was one of the best times in my life. And I hope everyone has a chance to do something like that. Great time to develop character. And anyway, so one of the jobs that I did is I worked for a painting company. A guy at our church had a painting company. And he agreed to take me on, let me work for him one summer. It's one of the jobs. I usually had multiple jobs I was doing at a time. And so I had no painting background. And so he said, okay, you don't know how to paint. Here's this thing. It's called a power washer. I'll give you a 5-minute crash course on how to use it.
Which is
Go.
typically about all it takes.
Yeah.
It is. I learned a lot through trial and error that first summer. But I got going with it. So power wash stained decks and patios and things, and really enjoyed it. It's one of those things I had no idea, but it's just, you're just out there by yourself, kind of relaxing. I mean, it's hard on your body after a while, but it's kind of relaxing. And then, you get done and it's very satisfying. It's very fulfilling work. And so I did that for a couple years with him. And then after college, I was just doing it independently on my own, started getting my own jobs. And so I was doing that. And that's, I think, what got my itch going to be an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Right.
To say, this is what I found is I work a whole lot harder for myself than I do for other people. And I wouldn't say that I didn't work well or I didn't have an honest work ethic when I worked for, other schools or other people. I think I was, but it's just a different level when you work for yourself.
Yes, right.
Way different.
Right.
So it's like
Way different.
I could take an hour lunch break if I want, or I could just get this done and get home early.
Right.
So
absolutely.
So there was that was part of, I think, doing that and seeing and really enjoying that process got me thinking like, oh, this would be kind of fun to do this. And so that's part of what I think led to the itch and the push to go full time with the company.
So you're in training you're being trained to be a driver's training instructor.
Yep.
You're still doing a little pressure washing, still teaching. Mm-hmm. You start the business and generate a few students. Mm-hmm. Generate a few students. You generate some business.
Thankfully, there were a few parents early on who, because I had no reputation, no one knew anything about me, and those first couple classes that I have, I still remember the students, still remember the parents. Small groups. The first class I had was 2 students, and still remember them. And I think the second class I had to cancel because no one signed up. The third class I had 3 students, and then I had to cancel a couple more classes. And anyway, it took a little while to get going, as probably any business would. Mm-hmm. But I was enjoying it. It was kind of fun. At that point, I think we were looking at it. Melissa and I were kind of looking at it. We'd put in a lot of time. We put in quite a bit of money, but we'd saved up for so everything was that we had invested into the business was just what we'd saved up. We didn't take out any loans for anything, so we were as secure as we could be. So we were just kind of seeing, okay, is this going to go anywhere? And I would say for the first 6 months or so from when we actually launched and started classes, I was pretty convinced it wasn't going to go anywhere. It's like, okay, this just isn't working very well. Neat idea. I don't think this is actually going to go anywhere. But lo and behold, things start picking up. And part of that is the seasonality of the industry. And we were in the middle of winter, and I thought, okay, I'm not getting any students. Something must be wrong with me. Well, no, that's just sometimes. Not a lot of people want to learn to drive in the winter, although it is really helpful.
Yes.
I remember my dad when we all took my brothers, because oldest of 4 boys. And so he would take us into parking lots, like church parking lots, and he goes, all right, we're going to start driving. He goes, I'm just going to pull the wheel over. He goes, and you have to correct it. And I'm like, what? But then he goes, well, you need to know what your vehicle is going to do when things happen. I remember that because I was like, they don't teach you this in driver's training.
Note to self there, Grant. You take the kids into a parking lot. And
it'd be kind of fun to go down to like the state police training academy, and that'd be really fun. Did you have to do anything like that for?
No, we didn't do
classes.
We didn't do anything like that. We did the training that we did was with the instructor. One of the things he did was he would get in and act as a student, and so we would have to. That's kind of how we learned how to do it in the car with the students. So this is what on first drive they would do, and so he's intentionally making errors and things. And I'm like, wait, why are you doing that? It's like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to step in and make sure,
so that you learn how to address it.
Yep. And so that was it. It was interesting. I do take them in the wintertime. We'll go into a parking lot. I don't usually grab the wheel and mess them up, but I'll have them, if it's a snowy day, okay, guess what, guys? Today we're learning how to drive in the snow. didn't plan on it, but that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's cool.
So you've been at this for 6 months, and then it starts to pick up, and you are still full-time teaching
oh yeah.
and full-time driver's training into that 7th, 8th, 9th month. And so now you're working 16, 17, 18 hours a day. And you have how many kids?
Well, at that time we had 4 kids.
So your wife absolutely loved this point in your life.
Well,
Again, sarcasm.
I think that's a good point to bring up. If she hadn't been so emphatically on board with this idea from the beginning and throughout the whole process, there's no way we would have continued. There were so many times along the way that we were at a point where it's like, okay, this is either I need more help, or I need more students, or I need more, whatever. It's just not working. And if she hadn't been so supportive about it, there's just no way we would have continued going on. I would have said, okay, this is a neat idea. I'm just gonna let this go. So, yeah, she was all in. It was very much a, this is our family trying to support this, trying to start this business. It was a kind of a family mentality. This was not okay, Dad's trying to do this. This is Dad's business. This is something we're all doing. We're all trying to get this going.
And I remember her being really excited about it. Like there was, there's obviously that level of stress, right? I mean, she's parenting 4 quite extensively, more than just homeschooling, and Dad comes home at 5 or 6 o'clock and is able to step in and grab a hold of 2 of them, and but I remember she was genuinely excited about where things were going as it started to ramp up, and I think that for wives listening, your excitement, your belief in what the family business is doing is, number one, an encouragement to be able to work all the harder when things get difficult for your husband. And I think that is so important also for the people around you, for people to be supportive of what's going on, because it takes a village, right? So I think I was just really impressed by the way that she, like, you could see her support for what was going on in that, even though she was, full-time, overtime mom. So your 9 months, when did the business really take off where you felt like this is we can get there? When did that happen?
Let's see. So it was about probably 9 or 10 months after we started. I had a class, and it was still a relatively small class. I had only 7 students, but it was a fun group. And that's, part of it was I enjoy working with students. I always have.
Right.
But that group, I remember, thinking back to, they were kind of an eclectic mix, different schools, different backgrounds, different, sort of interests. And at the beginning of the class, no one knew anyone, no one was talking. And then somehow throughout the class, it just got to be such a fun environment. And I enjoyed so much working with them. I just thought, this is great. I love doing this. And so that was that part of it, that kind of that spark of like, okay, I'm really enjoying this. That was really helpful. And then a couple months later, as we got into our first full summer is when a lot of people want to do these kind of classes. I had my first, I would say, big class. I had 18 students in a class. And I looked at the group and I thought, whoa, 18 students. This is incredible. And I think it was probably that class where I thought, okay, this might actually work. Like this might actually work as a business. And so that was
you're
about a year
in.
Yeah, about a year.
About a year in. And Justin, you've started a couple of endeavors with the wife support concept.
I was going to talk about that because, and that's one thing I tell guys like that I'm mentoring that are getting into business is, if your wife is not on board, this is going to be an uphill battle that's going to end very poorly. So I think that's one of the big key things is making sure that your wife is supportive, because it's going to be long hours, especially when you're just getting it off the ground. And to have that, like, I couldn't do anything of what I do if I didn't have Serena's support. I know that, in the days I come home from work and I'm just exhausted and beat, she's the encourager, or it's a little kick in the pants of like, stop being dramatic. It's going to be okay.
She does that for you too.
Yes. Yeah. And, or that not every day is going to be, a super fantastic, Mr. Optimistic type thing. I just think that's, and I think that's in talking with anybody that we do, or that anything that I've listened to previously on the podcast is, having your wife's support or your husband's support, if you're a woman running a business, it does help it make it more successful. I mean, I don't see how it can't, because if the two of you are working together, our pastor, when we did marriage counseling, if the end goal is, okay, we're doing this because God is calling us to do this, and if our point of, focus is Christ, well, if that's in each of our lives, every time we go towards it, well, we're constantly striving towards him, but at the same time, we're also growing together. Whereas if one of them, we're here at God and the other one's here at success and money, well, I mean, you're not really growing. And then you are growing, but you're not growing together. And I think that's I think it's a big thing that people miss.
Yeah. And I'll elaborate on that too.
Yeah.
I think between you and your spouse, or me and my spouse, I'll just speak for myself, it's essential. If you are not on the same page, if you are not, and not just to like, well, okay, I guess I'll let you start this business. No, they've got to be totally on board, where they're looking at this, they're as excited, they're looking at the goal. Okay, what are we trying to get to? What are we trying to do? If you're not on the same page, the business may turn out to be successful. It could, but it's going
to come at a cost.
Yeah, it's going to drive a wedge between you and your spouse.
And I think the other piece to look at is when you're doing that, and I've hammered it on a lot, just number of children in general, but even one child. The fact of the matter is that when you have a 9 to 5 and you're working 8 hours a day, you come home at 5 o'clock, and now you are a 2-parent family, like fully, completely. She can make supper, you can, play with the kids. She can play with the kids, you can make supper. Finances, you know exactly what's coming, you know where you know where things are. And I think it would be very easy to get in the mindset, well, I'm doing the extra work to build this business. But the fact of the matter is you, and I tell my boys this all the time, I couldn't do what I do without mommy doing what she does. And so it's almost like to think about the concept of caring for an employee, almost like your wife in some senses is working the business with you, but she's not, teaching classes or driving or maybe doing paperwork. You couldn't do what you did and maintain your goals as a family, to have your wife parent your children instead of someone else. You couldn't do both of those things without her stepping up and doing as much more work as you were doing. And so to be in the mindset, not only does she support, but you have to support her in her work just as much. When she has a tough day with the kids, it's no different than when you have a tough day with the students or the business or financial difficulty or whatever. I think it's very easy to separate what's going, well, you're doing this over here and I'm going to go build this business. So I've got all this extra work and all this extra headache and you need to be supportive of me and all that. Wait a minute. Those extra 8 hours a day that you're pouring into the business, she's still pouring into your family. And I think it can be really easy to not recognize that and appreciate that fully. And I think that's something that you guys did well because of your goal of the way you wanted to run your family. I think you had a really good appreciation for that. And it spilled out. We could see it. Those of us around you could see that you really supported what she did as much as she supported what you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, pretty well agree with what you said. And that's, I think it's true. It's easy for, I think on the outside to say, okay, you're starting a business, you're doing, gobs of hours. And I don't even know some of the times how many hours I was doing, but during those hours, that can be tough. That can be tough at home. And so the sacrifice, that's why it's a shared sacrifice. It's a shared success when things go well. And not just with the business. I know we're focusing on the business, but when we look at our family and where our kids are at, and all the things that are going right. And, we look at that and we say, okay, this is our work together doing both of these things. And our roles look a little bit different. I'm primarily doing this. I'm on the road with students, driving in driver's ed. She's primarily at home with the kids, but, we're working together. And if we didn't have that partnership, it wouldn't go well.
So I want to get into a little bit of nuts and bolts here. At some point, you decided to break from teaching public school or teaching in school and focus solely on being self-employed business owner and running the business. There were certain things that she had in mind that needed to be in place before you let go of the one and totally relied on the other. And there were certain things that you wanted to see in place before that happened. Were those the same things?
No.
I wasn't leading with that question at all. Again, reminder, Grant and Melissa and my family have been, friends and hanging out together for probably 8 years.
Yeah, something like that.
8 to 10 years.
Yep.
And so I've seen some of this. So yes, I am leading with that question. So if you could unpack that.
Yeah, So my wife grew up in a family. I grew up in a family. My dad was a teacher, very, steady job, consistent paycheck, all the things that go with teaching, the good and the bad. But the good thing about it is it was very consistent. It wasn't a lot of uncertainty. My wife grew up in a family where most of her life growing up, her father was self-employed. Her father's a contractor and does great work, but it was a different mentality. It was a different attitude around the house. And she was very comfortable with the idea of being a little bit more, I don't want to say daring, but just, I would say, relying on God more and saying, okay, this is something you've called us to do. Let's step out in faith. Let's give this a shot. Let's do everything we can to make it work, and let's trust him for the results. And so growing up, that's kind of how they were. They had some harder times. They had some great times. They had some very unique experiences they were able to do because of it. And so she was very comfortable with the idea of saying, hey, let's give this a shot. Let's do this. So I would say the first years, after about a year that we felt like things were okay, this is going somewhere, but is this something that's going to be a full-time job? Is this something I'm just going to do once in a while as, extra income so that, gives us a little bit more breathing room with our family? We didn't really know that quite yet. We hoped it would turn into something that was full-time, but we didn't really know. I would say after another year, so by year 2, we were at a point where she was saying, okay, it's time. Mm-hmm. It's time. And she was comfortable with it. I'd seen, okay, we're getting consistent enough students coming in. The numbers work out. I'm a numbers person. I analyze and overanalyze
being the math teacher,
numbers.
I would assume, yeah.
Yep. And so after 2 years, I think it was obvious to her, like, I think it's time. I think we can do this. I think you can make the jump. So we didn't. So at that point, I said, boy, I think you're probably right. It's like, I didn't want to disagree. It's like, you're probably right. But I'm not, let's I'll just go a little, because I can, let's just go this semester. Let's see how this semester go out. So continuing on with the virtual school. And
you had another 2 kids by this time, right?
Let's see.
Or another 1, maybe. You were probably up to 5.
We were probably at 5 at this point. Yeah. And so we, a whole school year goes by. So 3 years now into the business, and it's definitely like, okay, things are going just fine. I think we can make this work. She's continuing.
Another couple of years, we'll be able to.
She's continuing to say this, and I'm still. It's like the summer of the 3rd year, and a good time if you're going to move on from teaching. Good time to move on in the summer, middle of the school or before the school year begins, and so. It's like, yeah, I probably could. Let me just start this. We'll see how things go. So, as you can tell,
Grant had 0 risk tolerance.
Pretty much.
Melissa
She's like,
we can live in a tent. We'll be fine. Let's do this.
It's like, cut the cord. Let's go. So I think it was the fall after. So we'd been going for 3 years, and kind of into that fall, we got a chance just a little bit before. It must have been our 6th child was getting ready to be born at that point. I don't remember now, but we went away for the fall in the fall, and we just got away for a couple of days, Melissa and I, and we were just kind of chatting, long-term direction, which, is good to do sometimes, and get some goals and think through it. And I think she finally was like, okay, we got to talk.
It's time.
we're going to make a pros and cons list. We're going to like, she's ready to, and I knew it was coming and I knew she was right, but I just have this security, this sense of security. It's like, but when I quit that job, I don't know that the paycheck is coming in. But she was right. It was definitely time. And so I went ahead and the virtual school I worked for, the people I worked with there were great. And I moved on just a little before the semester ended, and just made the best transition that we could. And I think it worked out well with them, and we had a good relationship as I moved on. But they were very, very gracious with me and good with me as we moved on. But it was just before, I think around Thanksgiving, Christmas time that year that I moved on.
So you had mentioned earlier, looking back, sometimes God helps you look back and reveals more.
Yep.
When should you have let go of? You knew it was coming, Greg. You knew it. You can't pretend you didn't know that question wasn't coming.
Well, it's easy now to look back and say, hey, things were, now I know where we're at. So yeah, I mean, probably closer to the 2-year mark.
Okay.
I think.
So you're saying your wife was right?
Yes.
You're welcome, Melissa.
So why the 2-year? What were there certain numbers in place that you can look back and say, no, that would have been fine? What
consistency of class? So just looking at the classes, they're about every month or so that we're doing a class. So you look at, okay, how many students are coming in? You have some ups and downs with the seasons. Some higher in the summer, some lower in the winter, and then the summer you can do more hours because the kids are out of school. You can be out on the roads more, and so just kind of looking at how many students are we getting per month on average? How far back can we look back to see what are the demographics of the area? Does it look like this is what are the school sizes? How many students should I expect? Is this something that's going to continue? And so it was easy enough to look and to say, yeah, I'm getting enough students. This should be fine.
Mr. Numbers, did you have numbers in mind? Like, did you have some benchmarks, or would you put some benchmarks in place of, okay, if we're booked out this far, if everything stopped in 3 months, how long would it take us to recover and get back into? Did you have any kind of benchmark, like numbers or anything that you tried to lean into at all? Or
yeah,
no?
that's a good question, and I probably should have formalized that. Looking back, if I had back at the 1-year mark or whenever we first saw and said, okay, I think this could work, it would have been a good idea for Melissa and I to sit down and maybe say, okay, here are the conditions we need to see in order to say this business is ready to go, and I think that would have helped us probably put together some very objective things. And then when we get to the point and see it, oh, all right, it's time. We didn't do that. And so then it was kind of this like, well, it's looking good, but I don't know, let's wait another month. Like, it's easy to kind of kick the can down the road. And so in the end, I do remember running through the numbers that I ran through. It was in the fall. I think it was in September or October. And I remember looking and just kind of saying, okay, this is where the business is at. We've done a good job kind of keeping back some of our earnings. And then, so we had some money built up in savings. And I kind of looked at, this is what our family expenses are. This is what the business needs to operate. I didn't have any employees at that point. And so I looked and said, okay, right now with where we're at, even if we don't take in another dime in the next 6 months, I have the next 6 months covered for sure for our family, for our business. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew we had students registered.
Yeah.
We had a track record that it was going to go okay. But that helped give me comfort and just a perspective. I could say, okay, I don't need to make anything over this next 6 months and everything's going to be okay.
Right.
So that was probably the only thing. I should have done something a little bit more formal than that. But yeah, that's what I did.
Hey, it works.
Justin, did you ever run across something like that?
As far as what?
Like a place of leaving something behind, because you really let go and jumped into something right away.
Yeah,
you didn't have the transition period.
I don't. So very much like how you and your wife are. Sorry, I gotta new to this. Very much how you and your wife are. I mean, I am your wife's personality, and you are my wife's personality.
She must be a great person.
She's amazing, but her dad was a teacher. He was consistent. He coached all summer after school. He coached diving and gymnastics. And so it was very consistent, extremely consistent, where, I mean, my dad does commercial heating and cooling. And so he works a lot of hours. My mom works at the hospital in the pharmacy. But growing up, I mean, they worked. But for me, I am well, if God's calling us to this, we're just going to go. And so it was very much well, he said go, so I guess we'll just figure it out as it comes. And I think like with maybe a little bit more preparation, things could have gone smoother. But I mean, looking back, I can't.
Understatement of the century.
Yeah, I can't really say that. I don't know. Like you look back and it kind of shapes who you are and what you're doing. But like I totally understand, and because I don't know. I think it kind of comes down to your wife being supportive of whatever it is that you're trying to do, and your wife being supportive of like, all right, he wants to wait. It's fine. It'll be fine. You know, whereas my wife is like, hold on. I need more information before you go and do something.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm not ready yet.
She goes, we can't just jump at every single idea you have. That sounds good. I was like, why not?
So Grant, one of the, the concept, like I talked about at the beginning here, of people who are, going where you've been and really wanting to take off and be in that situation where it's like, okay, I got to let go of this other thing, or I don't, or I got to jump in, or in my case, I had to. Like, I didn't have an option. And, well, I guess that was before. I guess I did have an option after Justin fired me.
There's always an option.
There's always an option.
There's always an option. You always have a choice. But, somebody entering that situation, looking back on what you had, I mean, you did mention that having putting some goals in place, some kind of benchmark in place to say, okay, that way there's not emotion involved, risk tolerances are able to be factored in, but at the same time there's a reasonable, a mutual agreement between the two. So Proverbs 32, a section of the podcast where we just put a couple of gold nuggets out there. We're gonna offer somebody kind of some wisdom, summing everything up. What Proverbs 32, what do you have for the person who is new in business, who is a believer, like you were, and the other person is somebody who's been in business for a while and they meet Jesus and it's like wow, this actually has to change how I operate in my business. What pieces of advice would you give to those folks based on your experience and what you've seen?
So someone who's just starting a business, we've already hammered on the idea that if you're married, your spouse needs to be 100% on board with what you're doing. It has to be a shared vision. We've talked about that. So that's absolutely essential. Aside from that, find someone who has gone before you. Look for someone who is basically, I want to be that person in 20 years. And even if it's a different business, but someone who's walked through that process and get to know them. If they're willing to mentor you, that's great. But what's been interesting is the more people I've talked to who have gone through the process, starting their own business, managing a business, something like that, most of the time they love to talk to people who are just starting, who are they've got an idea. And I think I've noticed this in myself. Once we got started, once we got going with this and we saw like, okay, this is going to work, this is great, I started seeing all kinds of opportunities for other businesses. I can't tell you how many times I've told my wife, hey, I've got a great idea. And this is the time where she's just like, no. She's done a great job filtering those out.
I gave you one. Yeah. Let's start a podcast.
Yeah. So so that's, I think once someone gets going down that road, they start thinking in those terms. They see the opportunities, and I think it just gets you excited. And so, find someone who's older or who's done it more, and just say, hey, can we get together? Can we go? Can we get lunch? Can we get coffee? Can we talk? Can I talk to you about what I'm hoping to do? So I would, those two things. If you're just getting started, make sure those two things are good, and then pray a lot. If God has a direction or something that he's bringing you to, a direction he's leading you in, he'll equip you, he'll help you, but pray into that a lot. And a lot of times that we look back, and we haven't gone through, all the points along the way, and I couldn't even do it if we tried, but there were so many points that we look back, Melissa and I, we think, there were so many times we were ready to just hang it up and say, okay, this just isn't working. It's too difficult. It's too much. And every time we did that, and we were praying through it, praying the whole time about whatever the challenge was. Every time we got to that point where we were ready to hang it up, God gave us that little glimmer of hope, that next little thing, whatever it was that was our concern. He gave us that next little thing to keep us along, keep us going.
Don't give up yet.
Yeah, and I think when we look back now, we can say, okay, he was leading us. He was confirming, this is where I want you to go. This is what I want you to be doing. This is the ministry I have for you. But it's hard sometimes. There's going to be struggle. So keep praying into it. Make sure that you're seeking God in everything that you're doing.
Got you. And I think that applies to that second person as well, who's new believer. Like, okay, part of your new life in Christ is reliance on him, and that comes through prayer. So no, that's solid. I don't know what verse we're up to on Proverbs 32 yet, but
I'm not
17,
qualified.
18.
I'm not qualified to
You're not
write
qualified.
Proverbs.
This is borderline sacrilegious. So
Aaron, I didn't know this was part of it.
Justin is the new co-host. Your job is to come up with another title for that segment. Then, if it bothers you so much,
Just messing with you. I do have a question, kind of a follow up, and we kind of like hinted around it. But how is your faith played out in your business, as far as how it looks differently that in your interaction with students, with other peers in the industry, anything like that? I guess, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's if you're a Christian, it should just be kind of who you are, what you're doing all the time. So the way you're going to operate with honesty and integrity. I've been surprised as I've started doing this. There are lots and lots of ways. If you are someone who owns your own business and you don't have any fear of God, you can cheat in a lot of ways when it comes to money, your customers, cutting corners on materials, different things. And so doing what's right before God and always knowing that you're answering to him, I think that's just a different perspective in everything that we do. And there's that impacts just all the daily decisions, the way you interact with people, looking at people as and maybe just the idea that the business you're doing is really the ministry you're doing. That yes, it's a business in that it provides for your family. God's providing, you're making money, you're supporting your family and so on. But it's my ministry. So my customers are the people that I care about and that God wants me to work with and impact. So I get, working with a student who's maybe a little difficult to work with. And instead of thinking, okay, how much time do I have till this kid's done? It's like, okay, what reason is it that God has me with them? What do I need to, what does he want to say? What does he want to speak through me to them? What does this student need to feel? Maybe they need to know that someone cares about them. You talk to them, listen to them, show that you care. You never know. We don't know what all God brings people into our lives for, but looking at your business as a ministry, your customers as the people you're ministering to, and I think that God is your ultimate authority and accountability, not the IRS, because you can cheat the IRS probably. If anyone's listening from the IRS, I am not cheating the IRS. Everything is accurate.
80,000 of them.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway,
So-
moving on.
Yep.
So really kind of the integrity situation of it. And then it sounds like you're talking about kind of love in terms of the students. This is not just a business where you are teaching them, but you have a love for these students, and you've kind of sprinkled that across what we're doing is the students are individuals who are at a crucial point in their life, and the way you operate communicates to them that you do have love for them. And the way you're communicating to us, I'm like, wow, Grant really loves these kids.
I hope that's what they hear.
I hear it here, and
but you're not in my classroom. So, and you do. You're in a
I
classroom.
think we need to make a site visit.
Site visit.
Feel free. The kids would think it's great, or they wouldn't say a word because they'd be nervous. But you do. You have to be stern and firm about some things. You have to keep order in the class. And kids sometimes they need to be challenged. Sometimes they need someone to, I don't know, be tough with them. May not be the right word, but so I hope that they know, or that they can tell, that's my perspective. But if I didn't, and I get students asking me sometimes, like, why did you decide to be a driver's ed teacher? This is kind of a strange thing to do. Why people ask me, that's kind of interesting. Why would you want to do something like that? Or they say, do you like your job? Do you like what you do?
I'm so glad you asked.
And it's like,
let me tell you.
I was like, and I usually start like, if I didn't like this, why would I keep doing it? And they're like, well, to get paid. I'm like, well, I could do a lot of things to make money. I mean, there's a lot of different opportunities, but I'm choosing this because I see that there's the need for it. I see that there's a great opportunity, and ultimately this is what God's called me to do. And so, yeah, there are good days and bad days. There are plenty of
in anything. There's
Right,
good days
right.
and bad days.
but when you look back on it on the course, I think back now to almost 8 years of doing this. It's like, wow, what a blessing. It's been great for me, for my family, and hopefully for a lot of students and families that I've been working with.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Grant, people listening in the West Michigan area, they've got a kid coming up that needs to have driver's training. How can they get connected with Compass Driving School? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, to just kind of look at where we're at and what we have for classes, our website is just compassdrivingmi.com. And they could send me an email too if they have just specific questions about the process or anything involved with that or anything that we talked about today. The email address is just the same thing as our website, compassdrivingmi, but it's at gmail.com.
Okay.
And I'm the only one who answers those. So
That's okay. We'll put that in the comment section for those of you who are interested. It'll be in the comment section on whatever podcast platform you're listening. Justin, do you have anything else?
No, I mean, this has been fun. I think it's cool because you get to, like, I think part of it's like, man, I feel like I should be asking more questions or getting more, but being able to hear stories. And you and I, Aaron, were actually talking about it the other day about how even going through, I think it was just last night, like even in the story of how you got to where you are, there are so many lessons that even though you're not speaking it as a lesson, like anybody who's actually searching for something can pick it up and go, oh, well, I see here they did that. Okay. Yep. Okay. And I think it's awesome. Like really just kind of hearing your story and what you do. I mean, you choose to drive with people who've never driven before. I mean, that's a trust of God for sure. So
my job is to get in the car with people who don't know how to drive and let them drive. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
intimidating,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's extremely intimidating.
Well, Grant, we sure appreciate you being here on the podcast, and maybe we'll have you on again sometime to dig into some other topics that we got some questions on. But we do appreciate you. We thank you for listening to a Christian business podcast. It'd be great if you could share it on social media, subscribe, like all that kind of stuff, and God bless you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks, Grant.